And we are live. Best Ball with Bindles, special edition, the Fish Bonk back, episode 4. We got Tyler EmoCowboy, and we got the number one score in the regular season, Mathology for BBM. We are going to have a great time. We're going to talk some ball, talk some lessons learned, and a little bit of a dog bowl experience and how things went for them there. So strap in, lock in, and let's get it rolling. Hell yeah, brother.
Hell yeah. Oh, good. It's good to be back, Bindles. How's it going?
It's going good, man. Week has been good so far. Pretty fucking chilly up here in the north. I don't know about you down south. I'm sure it's still nice and balmy down there, but yeah, it's been good week so far. And yeah, it's looking exciting week 16, and also just we always like to, it's not the end of the season yet, but near the end of the season, look back and kind of lessons learned, things we can do better, how the landscape is going to change. So yeah, but how has your week been so far, brother? And how are you feeling about your bags?
We are chilling like villains, brother. Doing all right. The bags, everybody had a tough fucking break in the week 15 pods. That sweet advance rate you may or may not have had came crashing down, and the sweet, humbling, crushing fantasy god said, you get a few teams or you get no teams. That said, a couple bullets in the BBM, a couple bullets here and there throughout all the pre-draft and post-draft things. So at the end of the day, man, I had, with the volume I had this year, I'm just looking for a week 17 sweat. Feel pretty good given the fact that I faded guys like Kamara, and now he's out this week. Felt pretty good about some of the other backup running backs like Bucky and Estime. They potentially have a shot with Jalil being out, and being healthy with good situations. So at the end of the day, it's funny. You sit there and, week 12, week 13, you're like, man, did I do something wrong? Should I have done something different? And then fast forward to middle of the playoffs and you're like, oh, okay, all right.
Not looking too bad there, yeah.
And so it's like the lessons learned. It's always good to do it in when the playoffs are happening, because at the end of the day, like, you get in your head about the advance rate stuff, but it's like the finals and the playoffs is what matters. Like, everybody had takes pre-Amari Cooper last year, and then he blows up, and then Pickens blows up with Rudolph at the helm, who hilariously is now making another playoff start. Does Ridley do what Pickens does and like catapult any teams with him? So it's like everything you thought you got right and got wrong, playoffs start, injuries happen, shit changes again. And now it's like, take a backseat look holistically. And then it's like, was the process right? Not just the results. But doing fantastic. We've got our dog bowl pool floaty from Underdog and our swag, we're rocking. We stole a few things. We're gifted a few things. You had to make it out like bandits in Dallas, because that's what we do. And, throwing up the Kamara juke in Detroit Lions, because it's like, salute Kamara. You're dead in a bunch of my pods. And it's feeling good to have one less spot to worry about for my opponent's rosters. And it's also roster baiting season. This is what the Bonk Bros live for. Good old roster bait for a nice week 16 sweat.
Yeah, some people could say it is a Kendre Miller season, 2 years late, but I don't know.
Never wrong, just early.
Exactly. Marvin Mims even scoring some touchdowns. You didn't have to shove a burrito up your ass, but had some life.
He still has yet to score 2 touchdowns. Curious. Any player I make a burrito ass bet with does not get there ever. That's the thesis.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's always that one guy like in week 16, week 17 that when someone, you know what I mean, either BBM or just gets you onto the next round that's just out of nowhere. So I'm very, very intrigued to see who that will be. Maybe it's Marvin Mims,
It's
some other.
been Jalen McMillian so far, back-to-back weeks
Yeah,
of mattering bigly, as some would say.
we got Thad in here. Hashtag I know ball. The
What's up,
boys are
Thad?
back. We got Steph Miller in here. Bruce, yeah, you got to go get some shades, brother. It's the vibe. We got Texas politics saying, "I swear, State Trooper Bindles over there has pulled me over."
Yeah, you
Hey,
do have the Super Trooper stash.
yeah, I was gonna trim the little like things that I don't even know what they're called, like the little things on the bottom, but
Handles,
my
like handles.
girlfriend likes it, so I was like, okay, then I gotta
Oh,
lean
your
into the
girlfriend
bit.
likes a
So
little something to hang on to on the sides. She pulls your mouth deeper and deeper into the pool of love.
exactly. It's handlebars.
Yes,
All right.
sir.
So yeah. So what do you want to start going through kind of your lessons learned? We can kind of I just wrote a few down on my end, but I think we have a few kind of we messaged about before. But why don't you get us started and kind of we can just have a conversation from there.
I mean, the first and big one, I have to bring up because I feel like I said it last year, and I said I was gonna stick to it. I was gonna remember. I was gonna look at it and go, "Don't do that." And I fucking did it again this year, and that was summer injuries matter. Pay attention to them. Don't dismiss them. And I mean, there's a list of players we could walk through. I think there's two meaningful ones. One very meaningful one, and that's Christian McCaffrey. I mean, and this matters in a couple of ways. We know Kyle Shanahan has lied about usage and about injuries and about things like we knew he was untrustworthy. Coach Big Index had him as a very untrustworthy person when it came to injuries and status. We knew that McCaffrey, and to be fair, the injury was late in the camp. You know, it
It was,
happened
yeah.
in mid to late July, if I recall correctly. Um, but we heard it was a calf, and we know calf soft tissue things can be troublesome. Russ infamously missed quite a bit of time, about 4 or 5 weeks in the regular season until they felt he was physically comfortable enough to play through. He's a quarterback, and he's not exactly been like explosive rushing. He's just been getting there as a passer. Skill position, running back specifically, we should be worried about explosion. We should be worried about longevity. Christian McCaffrey's no spring chicken. And so despite that, him dropping an ADP, I let the well, mid to late season, and then 2 weeks after that, we heard he was Achilles, and I still didn't take my foot off the gas. I was like, fifth, sixth pick CMC. I mean, what if?
That beautiful ADP value, brother. Come on, yeah, I know it's hard to pass up,
Yeah.
especially after the drafting for what, like 4 months over the summer, right? So
So yeah, so it's like really and truly, and then similar thing with like Hollywood. Hollywood breaks his like collarbone or like the shoulder issue and whatever, and he was gonna miss it. He was gonna go on IR, miss at least a chunk of the season. I didn't already like him. I was a Hollywood fader in place for guys like Rice. I didn't like his profile. I didn't like I wasn't buying into the super hype of Kansas City. I was fading Travis Kelsey for age and stuff like that. But he falls into the seventh, eighth round before the season-ending news comes out, and I end up somehow with like 10% Hollywood by the end of the summer before the season-ending stuff comes out. Now he's back. I have exactly one team with him on it. I think it's like a puppy or something. So he
damn.
probably doesn't play, or if he does play this week, probably not a full complement of snaps. Maybe week 17 he matters as like a unique piece, but it's like, how much should we expect him to ramp up and do anything? But both players, it's like I told myself resolution I was going to hands off and let go with God those summer injuries because they bit us in the ass with Bateman last year and a couple other players. And I did the same fucking thing, and it tanked my advance rate even before CMC came back. And when he came back, before he got re-injured, he looked like a shell of himself. Unsurprisingly, his calf and his Achilles were hurting him. He looked slow. The offense wasn't doing as well, and litany of injuries, yada yada yada. But it's like he wasn't he didn't look like a first round player anymore. He looked like what Kamara looked like last year, which is he's there, he's putting up points. It's not that many. He's probably not
just volume,
changing a lot for you. So lessons learned. I gotta listen. It's the second year in a row I'm saying summer injuries matter. Take them more seriously. Be much more skeptical about injuries, especially with advanced age, especially when it's a skill position that requires like explosion and speed. And also take into account that like re-injury rates matter. I talk about them with, you know, soft tissue stuff with hammy and stuff like that, but I just, you know, I need to learn to listen to the skepticism. You know, I did it with guys like Hawkinson not coming back early with Chubb and, you know, re-injuries and they didn't look anything like themselves. And Hawkinson's been looking just fine, but the offense is not flowing through him with Addison sun running. And that's the one thing is like I was fading Addison, but then with his injury and the DUI thing, I started loading up on him. That said, high ankle, we've seen guys like Eckler, for instance, have monster years despite having a high ankle. But it's like non-injuries are all the same, but the serious injuries take seriously. So that's my big lessons learned takeaway for the second fucking year in a row. Maybe I can listen to myself next year.
Yeah, amen. Honestly, I think after, I mean, like whatever what we talked today, or kind of like as we think through it going into the off season, before drafts start back up in whatever is it, end of January, February, like with the big board and everything. I think I'm literally gonna like print out, like shout out to Nez. He said he would print out like different things and kind of have it like whether it's the week 17 matchups or whatnot. I think I'm gonna like print out my like these are the things I don't want to fuck up again. And just so it's always there in front of my face, like right there, so I can't ignore it, and it's always there in front of me.
No, that's a good idea. Maybe I'll have my wife tattoo it on her boobs. I'll see it every day, and I'll be like, "Oh, right."
You won't be able to miss that. That's for sure.
No.
I think I'm getting a call. So I think what's going on? Do you hear something?
Oh my god, I hear something. I hear something coming, and it's coming fast. It's coming hard.
Real hard. Oh my god.
Whoa, guys! Just at Kansas City, I just saw a lot of Patty Mahomes to Worthy, like we predicted back at the NASCAR Hall of Fame. That's going to be the player you need. I'm going to go to the finals with a Mahomes Worthy, just to stick it to Davis. Just to stick to Davis.
Love to go deep.
What's up, boys?
That's good to see you again. Oh, you called it. You called it. You were like, and process-wise, Worthy, shit ton of deep targets, just missing touchdowns. Yeah, my God, like and he's been usable the last couple of weeks. Now with Hollywood coming back, does that finally open him up to like the better version of himself, where it's just like get open, get deep, score? Many are saying Hollywood could be good for Mr. Xavier Worthy.
Yeah, I mean,
honestly, hit at some point in time, right?
Yeah. So Mathology, I know like kind of you come from your DFS background, and kind of one of the things you always have preached when we're talking together is kind of the good offenses, target those good offenses. And obviously for regular season it worked out super well for you, but I think that's also another big takeaway for me is we get so caught up with these you're going to hit on some like Bo Nix late, some maybe Bo Nix Sutton, or there's some late teams that do pan out, but it's just such a low probability bet. And you're just really all about loading up on these offenses where you just know like these are going to be the best teams. Try to get as many pieces as possible. So how do you feel about that? And how do you feel about any other tweaks on that or anything else that you would change about that?
Let's just pause there for just a moment, because I feel like we didn't quite intro Mathology to the levels that this king deserves. So before he answers your fantastic question, let us first set the table for those that may not be aware. Mathology here, #1 team in Basketball Mania to the regular season, and it wasn't even close, and 6th place in the Dog Bowl. OG of the Deposit Kingdom Discord, OG of the Best Ball DFS Bro Space, Bonk Bro Extraordinaire, Mathology.
I got 7 semifinal teams in BBM right now too.
Ooh,
7.
Magnifique. And I bet they're all correlated for the playoff weeks, Mathology.
Yeah. I feel like, I don't know. I don't want to toot my own horn, but I feel like I nailed this season-long slate pretty well.
I'll toot your horn.
So it was, I just kind of stayed right to that, just best players on best teams. I was pretty well off on Detroit. I was a little heavy on Kansas City, but I got completely bailed out with Cincinnati. I mean, if you drafted Cincinnati, really other than the Higgins issue, I mean,
cooking.
I have 5 Chase teams or 5 Chase Brown teams in the semis, and 2 of those are correlated with Burrow and Jamar Chase. So
Mathology,
I'm hoping for those guys to go off. I would love to sneak 2 teams into the finals.
Did you? Remind me, did you draft most of your teams or all of your teams like before, I forget, it was like end of July or when was the cutoff?
That was last year. That was lessons learned from BBM4 being take lock on my takes, Kelsey to the moon. You know, I drafted like 30% Kelsey at that price. That was stupid. So this year, no take locks, team bets, try to be tethered to the best quarterbacks, draft quarterbacks. I wasn't big on elite tight end. Let them slide, be in on guys like Brock Bowers, Goddard, Njoku, Pat Fryermuth, John O. Smith super late, Henry once in a while if it was correlated. That was kind of like, it was just like, you know, whoever your first round pick was, draft that team out, and then who are they correlated with 15, 16, and 17. So if like Chase has that huge advance rate and you have a lot of them, that whole team did really well. And then hopefully you're getting through with those game environments, because we're seeing scoring down lately. It's spiking up at kind of the wrong time for how I built. But I'm hopefully this week we can kind of slow it down a little bit, not have so many teams score 30, because when a lot of teams score 30, it opens it right up. You know, Adams, Thomas Jr. Granted, I had some of those guys, but you know, if that happens again, it opens the field out to just non-correlated teams, and that would be bad for my advance rate. But we'll see what happens. You know, I'm hoping this is a good week, and my goal going in was just to make to the finals. You know, get my money back with a chance to ladder up and maybe get a shot at that top 20. You know, top 20 gets 6 figures. That's what I want. You know.
Thought I was on mute telling the dogs to shut up. But I mean, like it's crazy that like we get so deep in the weeds with like correlation, but we forget that at the end of the day, it's team level stuff is the biggest boost, because if you capture, you know, a team that's overachieving, and we've seen that in every BBM. It's just like a team or an offense that's overachieved either full season or for stretches of the season. Or in Karane's case, for like a single stretch of like 2 games or whatever, from like the Brady Bucks sucked all season, and then in the playoffs provided huge spikes. I mean, you kind of mentioned that, like, you know, we're seeing scoring kind of elevate, but I think part of that's just like as offenses get more comfortable and as defenses get injuries, we're just seeing
giving up. Like the Giants have given up.
Yeah.
Like the Giants are DFS or single game slate. The Falcons are Bijan's gonna go absolutely ham against the Giants this week. Like,
well, and then also
Lions
like
defense,
teams try to play it conservative early in the season, try to like hide things, whether it's QB, O-line, whatever, defense, and then things start tightening up. Playoff picture starts becoming much more clear, and it's time to let loose, either try out the young guys and ditch the vets that aren't doing anything, or have like, oh shit, we have to score or we are getting fucking bounced. And you know, teams are adjusting like that. And then even the Lions offense, perfect example of like an offense that was doing pretty good, but a defense that was keeping games, you know, pretty locked down. And now with defensive injuries, every game's going to have to be just a fucking shootout. Same thing with the Bills. Bills were pretty run heavy early on in the season, and now they're opening things up completely to, you know, just annihilate their opponents. And you're just getting huge spikes out of like the entire team. I mean, fuck, 3 running backs on their team had usable scores a week ago.
Ty Johnson revenge game.
Revenge game.
So Tyler, you're saying you want to get to Dr. Evil's question. So why don't we address this?
Yeah, this one is. I feel like this is one of those unique things. I detailed the timeline in the offseason that, and this was following the fantasy doctors that have their degrees, have their historical data, and this is something where, like, by all accounts, Jonathan Brooks had an out to not be placed on IR coming into the season. His timeline, his youth, the only missing box, and shout out to Edwin Porras of Fantasy Points, who noted that the key ingredient that had been successful with the running backs coming off of ACL tears were super, super athletic, like elite athletes. Brace was an elite athlete, and typically that measure is found via the combine. Some measure of like explosion and speed and agility. We did not get Jonathan Brooks' RAS. So he had 2 of the 3 checked boxes of, like, we don't know how athletic he is, and hard to tell. You get college game speed for some players, not all players. It's not all public data unless you like crack the top 10 or 20. One of those metrics, by the way, I used to find that Corum declined in his top speed year over year off his ACL in college. But anyway, we had no indication at any point until like late July, early August, that he was definitely not on track to miss IR, but was more likely to be placed in IR. Okay, even in IR, he wasn't activated until like, oh God, what was it, week 10 or 11?
9 or 10 or something
so,
like that.
I have to say it's a bad run out. Not just because of
you said it earlier. Hurt players in preseason, man. Just
right.
I didn't. I think I have 2 shares like throughout BBM. Like he was one of those guys like do not draft. Like all the content creators loved him. Yeah. He should not be. He was going ahead of Chase Brown.
Yeah. So I think
what are we doing? Why
price wise, he should have started falling, and that was the one injury that I did adjust to properly. When he got placed on IR, I then knew, okay, he's out 4 weeks. Not only is he out 4 weeks, though, he's missing all this training camp, because we had gotten notes that, okay, he was going to be placed on IR, but he also hadn't gotten to train. So part of that was I told people, I was like, okay, he's going to have to ramp up. It's going to take 2 to 6 weeks to ramp up physically in a vacuum. He hasn't gotten to get full reps yet, though. Like, he missed all of training camp. We talked about this in the Discord. I talked about this with Easy. It's like, he's not getting to ramp up like Nick Chubb would ramp up because he's not had live reps. And that also means not live reps with pass pro and with the O-line and with the quarterback. So from a physicality standpoint, not getting physically activated, because it's one thing if he got activated and just like wasn't good and was bad and he missed a shit ton of time. So from like the time missed, it was a bad run out. I will not be surprised if we get like the Bateman version of this at the end of the year, that, oh, he had a setback and we didn't tell anybody. Because that's what happened with Bateman. It's like, hey, right, he said he was 100% healthy coming into week 1, and then we IR'd him, and actually we almost ended his season before the season started. We hear that at the end of the season. So I won't be surprised if we hear about a setback for the physical aspect. But yes, his price, he only dropped like 20 picks over the course of like that few weeks before the summer.
90 to 120. That was it. He was in that range.
And at that point, advancing a player who wasn't going to play the first 4 weeks, but we knew was going to take, now because missing all that time, it was 4 to 6 weeks. 4 to 6 weeks for ramp up. Same thing with Chubb. I was out on Chubb with his thing.
On a bad team that's not going to score a lot of points.
Yeah, so the pass catching out was an out for him to be able to like overcome that. But again, we didn't know how athletic he was. We didn't know how much time he was going to miss, and we didn't know how much time he was going to take to acclimate. So I took my foot off the gas the second, and I don't think I really took him at all the second he got IR'd, because he was just going above prices that shouldn't, like, and you mentioned that. I should have been more hesitant to take him aggressively in pre-draft and like May, June at that price, similar to Jalen Warren, because it's like injuries happening late, especially with young players. And I talked about this with JMO's rookie season. I didn't take any JMO his rookie season because his ACL was going to keep him off the field for a long time. Speed is important, and reps take time, ramp ups take time, but also skill position players missing time. Rotoviz did research on this years and years ago. Is that skill position players that miss a majority of their rookie season because of that training camp, OTAs, and then the reps in season almost never pan out because, and it's more receivers and tight ends, but like because it's so hard. So JMO coming on this year, really wild, but it was because he got all of the reps and they installed the system around him. But it took him all that time to physically and mentally acclimate to the system. That's one thing that for like rookies, injured time could be even more of a focus because they're learning things for the first time, including these pass pros, these packages. And we've seen coaches want to lean on people that know the system. Kareem Hunt came out of nowhere to matter for like 8 weeks because he knows the system and knows shit. And at skill positions, that's important. So I'd say Brooks, it was bad process to take him at the price. It was bad run out for missing as much time as he did and then re-injuring himself the second he started looking viable through the pass game. But it was very obvious they were going to keep leaning into a split backfield to help Bryce out because it didn't make any sense to load up the young guy. And I fought that for a long time, longer than I probably should have. So that was a wild run out. But you have to be cognizant of that. Like chaos is entropy typically fucks things up for you. So it's like an injured player is at a tail end to not get re-injured or not beat the time. Like they're never going to beat the timeline. And there's a very good chance that they also have issues returning to form. And so it's like being mindful of that for all injuries, but especially younger players is big.
Chubb probably beat the timeline, but he never gave you any really good value. He probably never got in best ball form, never really actually mattered.
Yeah. And what was he going to do for, like, he wasn't going to send Chuba to the bench. So it's like you were hoping he
Right.
would get 60-70% of the work by week 17 on a bad team. And it's like, what was that really doing for you in the 110s to 130s versus your Chase Browns, your Spears, your Pollards, your B-Robs, your Ecklers? I mean, yeah. So
Yeah, absolutely. We got a couple friends of the channel here. We got the oldest man to ever stream 150 drafts, Neil Orfield. Shout out to Neil. We got Code Blue. If you guys haven't checked out his hit him with the gritty videos, go do that after this. Those are absolutely
Code Blue.
amazing.
What's the next best ball documentary you're gonna do? You gonna leak that in chat? What's the early leans?
Bonk Bros.
So good.
So I think we have to talk about the running backs and wide receiver injuries in tandem because I feel like those are kind of the story of the season. So like, do you think it was bad process to not take kind of like the Mixons and Jacobs and those guys at cost? Or do you think it's just like we had so many wide receivers get injured that kind of skews things one way? And also, like where obviously we don't want to fall behind the Avalanche. And I think obviously because of the running backs that might change the ADPs a little bit, probably not for the sickos, but maybe once we get into the summer. But where do you guys think that line is where like the wide receivers are still kind of mattering in terms of both the number and like what they're giving you and the upside? Tyler, why don't you start and kind of give us your take on kind of that
Well, last year's
dynamic.
lessons learned, we talked about the wide receiver avalanche being kind of maybe the most construct of fake constructs, because like it was not only was it not necessarily accurate to where the line was, but it also didn't take into account just players past the line that could matter for a multitude of reasons: injury, role change, or just talent that was better than we thought, a la your rookies, a la your second year players that break out. So going into this year, I think we all agreed that like wide receiver avalanche and the line was likely to be wrong and was likely to be overplayed. That said, structurally, like building sound structures are good. You can build sound structures without preconceived notions of where and who. And so as far as your specific question, I faded Barkley. I faded Henry. I had the most of Henry, and I faded JT. I had like probably at the field with Achan, at the field with a couple other running backs. I had like 20% Nixon though, because like, so I identified, I basically played it as profiles. I said, okay, these running backs are all in similar tiers, but if I can get maybe the best, cheapest bet attached to a top offense, I want to be highly exposed to that, because I feel like the opportunity cost, I don't know that I'll identify the right lines, but I do think I can identify, like, if I can get a running back that's at similar or better than guys 2 rounds before, let me take as many shots as I can on the wide receivers, tight ends, quarterbacks in that range. I feel very good about that bet. He's got injury again, and he missed 4 weeks with a hip drop tackle thing, but crushing his ADP and stuff like that. That said, guys like Jacobs, guys like Jacobs and Kamara, I did not move on to when the rookies or second-year guys behind them started missing for injuries and etc. That was just going to give them more time to take over all of the backfield. So I was definitely slower to. My lessons learned is, like, you can have takes about players, and I think the Kamara run out, he was looking fine. That run out for like quarterbacks going down with an injury in the finals, like, the Kendra thesis is sneaking in there. I don't know how much he's going to matter with Spencer Rattler or Jake Hayner at quarterback behind that O-line, but at the end of the day,
13 projected points on the offense.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like, is he going to fit in your roster this weekend? Probably, yeah. Is he going to outdo Spears, Pollard, Jacobs, Mixon? Like, probably not. So I think it was just that I think I was slightly better about where and how I was building. That said, I definitely took too many of my shots past the proverbial line at rookies. And my lesson learned was just like, mix and match much more, because at the end of the day, like, injuries can ruin a good thesis and injuries can make a bad thesis work. And at the end of the day, you just want to build structurally. And I think Mathology did a great job of that this year. He's just like, I'm going to take players based on the bets I've made on my team and build through that. Jacob's attached to we know McFleur runs a very good offense. We know Love and this team was aspiring. And the one thing we knew is we had no idea what fucking wide receiver was going to matter. A simple-brained man says, well, I know who will matter, and that's the running back in a team with a very good, exciting offense. And I was too stubborn to think that they would lean into the run game if they just didn't have a true alpha at wide receiver. And that's exactly what they've done with this team, and they've done it very well. And so it's like, some of the bets work, some of the bets don't. And at the end of the day, I think mixing that stuff in also helps you mix in the types of receivers you're taking past the early rounds. Because I think it's important to build teams with players like Saquon and Henry or whatever, and build better versions of those teams. We talked about doing that.
Right.
I just did that too infrequently with the early guys, and probably too often with the Najees of the world. More Najee than Jalen worked out, especially when Jalen got hurt. But how much has Najee mattered compared to Connor? Had a lot of Connor, but it's like, okay, I didn't have enough Connor with guys like JSN and Mooney and etc. to help the advance rates, because at the end of the day, advance rate does matter for getting your better constructed teams into the playoffs to matter. You'd like more bullets. I don't think it matters more than the other, but it's like that. So from that standpoint, being a little bit more humble about takes, because chaos is going to humble everything. And I was bad about that again this year.
Learn from that. That's how you get to first place and lap the field, is when you think everything is cozy and comfortable. We all think it. The whole community thinks it, especially when you hear it on all the content creators. They're all saying the same thing. The whole entire market's doing it. So that's why you need to kind of pivot off. And it's not a crazy pivot. It's just all right, let's
Tweak it a little bit.
try for like a week straight. Let's go RB heavy, or let's go elite quarterback. Let's maybe grab 2 of them and see what happens. I'm looking through my pods right now. I see so many 2 elite quarterbacks in this pod. It's just nuts how well that did this year. And no one wanted to do it. Everybody wanted to kind of pound Gritty for it, but like, it was kind of a sharp tape. You just don't do it for 150 straight. Just sprinkle it in at time to time. You're going to see those different bullets will do well. You know,
I think double elite had its merits for very good offenses and very high floors. I was not into that because I liked the guys like Jaden Daniels who could give you access to that without the price, which
Yeah.
is good. That
Yeah.
said,
that's
too
the sound.
often,
But
too
if
often,
he's your first, you know, you're with everybody else. But if you pair him with Lamar, holy shit, you know, that's
yeah,
a good
which was
team.
hard to do because they have the same bye week. But guys like Hertz and Allen, you did very well with. And then, but dual elite, yeah. I think where Gritty stepped in shit was he's obsessed with 3 elite quarterbacks, and it's like quarterback scores the most.
Well, he
2
was
elite,
too
elite
way
shot
too
for the offense.
condensed with his player takes, and he had take lock, and
Yeah,
he'll learn that next year, and not be so take lock, and kind of spread out those positional players, the running backs, the wide receivers, and move that shit around a little bit. And he'll probably do well next year if he comes back.
Quarterbacks and running backs score the most on half PPR. Just because there's 3 wide receiver slots does not mean
right.
They score the most, and I wanted to be sure of that, and I think I did a decent enough job. I definitely could have had more Hertz builds, more Hertz Daniels builds, just because you can kick. I think that's something you talked about last year, and that's something we're alluding to is quarterbacks and running backs score the most points. We don't always have to push it to the extreme. So every time I took CMC, I didn't have to have the thinnest bets at running back to create a super team. When I took an elite quarterback, I didn't have to push it all the way to Bo or May or Carr.
Yeah, I think that's wrong. Like, I mean, not necessarily
every
wrong.
time. Pushing it every time.
I have 2 CMC teams in the semifinals. 2.
Yeah. I have 1.
2. You have 1. It's like, I mean, it's the hits that matters. It's that Chase Brown and the 10th that matters. Like, you can be wrong in the early.
I agree.
As long as you make, you get those guys you need to have later on.
I just think pushing it to the max every time you do an early receiver build or an early run, it's that take lock, not just on players, but on structure. And it's like, it's okay to sprinkle in, and if we can do less Davis and Gritty and create carbon copies of every fucking team we create, instead it's go, hey, if I'm a good drafter, if I'm a good best ball player, I can create a good version of everything. Right. And then the best versions of those will thrive. So every time I hopped on with best ball guy and we grabbed CMC, despite him saying, I kind of want to fight, his reason to fade CMC, ridiculous until the injury thing. It's like, even then, okay, theoretically, yes, building the biggest hits at the running back position theoretically sounds good with a CMC team. That said, CMC smashing doesn't mean grab the thinnest bets to hit. It means try to grab the best bets. But too often we go, wow, what if this thin path to success matters for the run? And it's like, at the end of the day, you can build teams with different types of play. Identify good plays, identify good players, identify where your stance that may be well articulated. My stance against Josh Jacobs, very well articulated, not necessarily accurate, not necessarily right 100 times out of 100.
Right.
So it's like, take him and then build, okay, if he smashes, this is how he smashes. But that doesn't preclude you from saying, well, Jacobs, I got Jacobs, so that means he's my anchor and I don't need to take guys like Connor, Kamara, Pollard, Spears, etc. It's like, well, no, I can take those guys because if I'm building these teams, access to the other wide, like we talked about, it's getting take locked in, who matters, who doesn't, because it changes every 4 weeks. Someone is scoring more or less, or coming on, or fading off. Malik Neighbors was the second coming of Jesus Christ until week 5.
Yeah,
he was.
To your question, Ben Knowles, I think honestly, it's the bend that don't break defense. Everybody's playing the shell, cover 2, cover 4. Don't give up the big plays. We don't see big splash plays. There's only a couple offenses that have it right now. So that's why scoring's been down. Teams are willing to run the ball more because they can get 4 to 5 yards and they'll just do clock management. And that's it's been bad. Entertainment wise, hasn't been all that much fun to watch. I don't know about you guys. I don't really watch a whole lot of Island games. I put Red Zone on Sunday.
I watched too many.
Tonight's going to be. I think tonight's going to be a boring ass game. I think both teams are going to establish it, and it's going to be a lot of running. The clock's going to burn real fast. I think it's going to be a lot of running backs tonight. I think that's the way that tonight's going to go. Maybe Ladd and Sutton can get you a touchdown, but it's not going to be a whole lot of pass volume tonight. I think both offensive lines have a little bit of an edge, and they're going to lean into that tonight. And I think that a lot of teams see that, like especially with the Eagles, they're just why Saquon went nuts. It's just because they're like, we're just going to run it so much because we can.
Yeah.
They just take the path of least resistance.
Yeah. Yeah, I think kind of what you guys both alluded to a little bit is kind of like, and we were talking about earlier with EmoCowboy of just like having these up on the wall next to me so I don't forget it. But it's like, yeah, you get into these grooves when I feel like we say this every offseason. We're just like, you keep doing the same thing. You like these couple players in this range and you just go all in, which isn't necessarily wrong, but it's like, be more humble about, okay, evaluate each player and their profile and like, how does it fit into this build versus just like, I'm never going to take this player, right? Like this player in this range. Like, I think that's, and it's also like kind of the whole fish bonk back moniker is we are in a bubble with all these different content creators, right? We're watching the same stuff, we're consuming the same content. And so it's almost like we feel like we have to conform to the social norm of what's going on when it's like, at the end of the day, like, right, like you make a couple teams into the semis or whatever, that's a great year, statistically speaking. So it doesn't really matter other than just like posting your screenshots on Twitter and just, you know what I mean, being a part of the in group. So like, I think it's hard to do that when you're in the swing of things once you're drafting the whole summer and everything. So
yep.
I really think like I'm gonna really try to like I said, just tattoo it on something or put it on something and just make sure we don't forget about that once we get into the swing of things. Because it's easy to do it now, right? It's easy to do it in February, in March when there's not as much going on. But once you really get excited and you're like, oh man, whatever player, Rashid Shaheed, and I'm gonna draft him every single time, which he would have smashed if he would have stayed healthy. But
yeah, the fear of missing out is hard.
It's
huge, you're like,
yeah.
oh man. But like that's one thing I was just like, Jonathan Brooks, he's just way too expensive and he's not going to pay all that ADP. And every time I was just like, I'm not going to click it. Not going to click it.
I think there's some good discussion in the chat. I want to just touch on Neil saying that as a diversification bro, and that's the thing. Neil had a few player takes. I think part of the problem is just like you can get wiped out even if you're diversified. But I think that goes to like how you're constructing and how you're correlating. Like no offense, things like the sidekick or like and even easy sheets, like yeah, you do get correlation boosts for things and they can help and they can hurt, but it's also like the types of players that are being added. It's just like, does the wide receiver 4 boosting your correlation like super duper help? It's like, I don't know, it's like
probably not.
How much more does that matter versus taking a shot on wide receiver 2 upside on an offense, etc. Like there are macro ways of like how do players have a path to mattering. We are far too uncreative when we think of those things. We're very good at finding out how players don't smash, and we're far too simplistic on how they can. I really do think that's the case. But there's also, I think there's value to just like diversifying with a bunch of shit does not, like, you know what I'm saying? Like their offenses like the Bucks and the Seahawks of years past, where it's like, what if this coach boosts the quality of this team with players we've seen valuable, like Baker, we'd seen valuable quarterback play from in his experience. Gino had shown us a very good 6-game sample filling in for Russ. The doubt on those teams with passing gurus like Cohen, okay, those are paths to succeed diversifying there versus Patriots year over year. It's like, do we really expect a team like this to really elevate for scoring outside of a running back or the quarterback being mobile? And we've seen like May looks good, and honestly, like no one on that offense really matters. Versus you'd like pieces on what happens when Sean Payton gets Bo Nix and these players that we've seen ceilings from in Cortland Sutton and and to an extent Jaleel McLaughlin. It's like how can these Jerry Jeudy, for instance, like we've seen these players have stretches. There's less of a thin path for guys that have had success in the past smashing, and then like the Browns of like how heavy do you want to invest in a team with a very bad quarterback over a 2-year stretch in Watson, Yes, Winston and Flacco provided big boosts to these players, but the implosion downside if that quarterback gets benched, like Flacco could have easily not sunrun last year with Browns and imploded like he did in Indianapolis this year and get benched for AR again. So it's like, I think there's value in saying I want to diversify between offenses that project well or that have a path to doing well, outperforming them versus spreading it out over every offense, every player. Because at the end of the day, there's going to be select few teams and few players that truly matter and hit. And like you said, Matt, it's like your hits matter more than your misses. But if you can consolidate down to the hits you're trying to get, the ones that really pop. And it's hard to identify those, but I think the humility comes in being a little bit more creative and a little bit more.
Yeah, and to keep it simple, stupid, it's those team environments that are going to score points. Like to bet on the teams that are going to have implied points total of 14, 15, 16 that like Carolina, New England, like that's just so thin. Like that's like hitting an 8-leg parlay. It really is. Like
Yeah,
when,
I think that's
when the
where
content creators were like on those guys, I was just like, well, thank you. Like easy for me just to like, I'm going to grab Chase Brown. I'm going to grab these guys that are tethered to the best quarterbacks.
I think that's where your DFS background comes in, Mathology, where you're just like, you're thinking about it. You're like, okay, it's week 10. How, you know what I mean? Yeah. How many points is this team actually projected for, like realistically, right? Unless we just get a crazy percentile outcome on this offense. Like,
yeah,
it's
if
just,
that beats me, it beats me, you know?
Yeah,
I'll
exactly.
Tip my cap and move on. It wasn't my slate.
Exactly. Well, it's the easiest way. We talk about BBM being brutal because it's 2 of 12 to advance your pod, and then it's 1, 1, 1, and then a 500 something person final. What's one of the easiest ways to thread that needle? Very fucking good teams in real life that provide you full season of points. They can have lulls, but their lulls are never going to be as bad as the shittiest teams, and they are the most likely to produce several good players. And so it's like that's where like a team onslaught type of thing of like you'd be drooling to have 3, 4, 5 players on, the Bills and the Eagles. Now, we did that with the 49ers a lot. 49ers are one of the most expensive offenses. They've run bad with injuries. But if we were more humble about who's a more viable wide receiver 4 to take, Juwan Jennings on the Niners, who had an awesome stretch in the playoffs, or some motherfucker on the Panthers or the Patriots. It's like my late shots should probably be on really good teams because their path is simply any injury or any role change.
Yep.
There's just random touchdowns waiting for either starters or bench players coming in for the fourth quarter versus what are the odds the guy on a shitty team matters. And to that effect, it's like another lesson learned that we're not really good at. And Juwan Jennings is a really good example of that, is that we tend to kind of ignore like playoff runs.
Right.
Unless it's
older players as well.
I think Gabe Davis is like the only player that's like and that was because 4 touchdown, appearance in one of the best games of all time.
It's hard to forget.
National television, and then his ADP never falls. Every other player, Lenny Fournette with the Bucks, with Brady, like running. It's like players that have really good stretches in the playoffs. They tend to cement their importance with that team, especially if it stays with the team, and in a skill position. Like Edelman gets hot in the playoffs, and it's like those stretches matter because like that's chemistry with the quarterback. That's demonstrating to the coach that they can do it, and that's maybe they're finally getting their feet underneath them because like what he did in the playoffs last year was really fucking incredible, really impressive. Probably a reason I'm not taking him a lot until his contract, fine, but then his contract, and it's like okay, they gave him like real money, so playoffs plus real money. They're going to use him. They're incentivized to use him, and he probably should have been going over the first round or the first round pick Ricky Pearsall because it's like, rookies coming along. It's not always linear, especially at a wide receiver position. It's like they translating to the NFL is hard. He had red flags in his prospect profile, but also we had a coach, Shanahan, trusts veterans. We've seen him plug in veterans and play them. Ayuk and Debo got doghoused and not really used in the rookie year.
Right.
even before the gunshot. So it's like, I should, as someone that's like, listen to coach speak, listen to whatever. Well, contracts matter. When Christian Kirk was given all that money, he was going to get fed by the offense. It's not like running back, like skill position players. Like there's only so much allotted for that. Adam Thielen, we all wrote him off last year. He gets that bag, goes to Carolina. Sure, he tails off by the end of the season, but like his price, was it really hampering you, or was it able to like bridge something? So it's like,
Well, 13th round last year, it's a smash.
yeah. So it's like there are things to there are things to pay attention to, and there are things to write off. I think we write off things really easily, or we overrate their importance. And so I think just being more cognizant of price and really looking closely at what are we pricing in, what are we looking at, are we doing too much? And you gotta love, as I say, are we doing too much? Bendels is drinking from the cow's udders for the Milky Boys.
Love it.
Another discussion I wanted to have before we kind of talk, I mean, we can keep talking lessons learned, and, but is just the elite tight ends, because we had such a, right, we had Laporta was kind of ahead of everyone for a long time, and then we had kind of that big grouping of Kelsey, Andrews, Kincaid, right, and then Kittle was a little bit later, and then we had kind of like the Njoku Bowers range. How do you think the way that it played out this year will affect like the ADPs and just how you'll be drafting tight ends? I know Matt, you said we're more on the late tight end train, but how do you guys think that'll play out?
Yeah, I don't think it's played out yet, because if say Kittle smashes tomorrow or on Sunday, or Laporta just takes over and breaks the slate. It just, we're not there yet. Like, I don't think we don't know the lesson learned yet, because that's the whole thesis. Is like, you have that one that can separate in these pots.
In the last 2 weeks, yeah.
No one separated at the tight end position week 15. Jonnu, I guess, a little bit. He had like 15 points, but it wasn't no 20, 25, 30, so we'll see what happens.
Yeah. I think there's something to take away, and I think it's simply that like there were good prices and there were bad prices. Like so far, I don't think that the elite tight end thesis is that they provide you a ceiling that you may not get with later tight ends. That's mostly true. Jonnu proved like a couple late tight ends before him. Jonnu probably the best version of like McBride, where a late tight end gave you a super high ceiling because his talent and his offense were underrated for his price. That said, that was unique to him versus a guy like, say, Hunter Henry or Juwan Johnson, who, multiple touchdowns will give you a big high ceiling, but that does not make you weekly that. And there's value, and we talked about this in our year-end recap last year. I talked about this with Best Ball Guy on a few streams, where it's like, what if we couple the volatility of the tight end position, even with an elite, with like several lates? So like an Andrews or a Kittle with 2 late guys, and you're just capturing the volatility, but with a guy has an awesome ceiling because of either his profile or his offense, etc. There's no like right or wrong answer. I think elite tight end thesis, much like the quarterback thesis, is valid to an extent. It matters more because it's a onesie position, but it's going to score less than quarterbacks and score less than. So it's like, as a position, how much do I really want to pay for that premium? And at that point, I think paying for the premium becomes much like every other pick, where it's like, be picky about who you're doing. I didn't like Kincaid as like sticker price. I thought McBride was worth the sticker price given the kind of volume and efficiency he could see, and the kind of bump he could take with touchdowns. And obviously it's kind of hampered him a bit, not getting enough. And he's gotten some decent red zone targets. He hasn't gotten really high quality red zone targets. He's not being looked at a lot in the red zone, but his production's been really awesome. But he's kind of been like what Brock Bowers and Jonnu Smith have given you, with less touchdowns. You paid 3, 4, 5, 10 rounds more expensive. So it's like, at the end of the day, I still want elite guys' ceilings, but guys like Andrews and Kincaid and Kelsey all had, and I said this at the time, very questionable peripherals for their prices. And if I was going to take a guy early, I wanted a guy that was going to ascend and outperform that price. And I didn't like aging veterans with injury stuff. And so it's like I think the tight end conversation is not too different than every other position and every other price. Price matters, offense matters, profile matters. And for a position that volatile, I'll never be super comfortable investing a lot early on any and all elites.
I didn't draft any Kyle Pitts this year.
Oh, I love saying Kyle shits. I love saying Kyle shits. And I got spooked a little bit.
Leone was the one that was pumping out. Everyone's like, oh yeah, Kyle, he's gonna do it.
Reeves did too. I love Reeves, and Reeves is like, dude, the quarterback bump could matter. And for tight ends, we talked about, it's like being in on play action and being in on the goal line is so critical for spiking randomly for touchdowns. And what do Pitts and Noah Fant have in common? Being very athletic, but being kind of tweeners that aren't involved in play action and goal line a whole lot. And we've seen that hamper both guys on a season-long standpoint. And a guy like Kirk Cousins coming off of an Achilles on his plant leg, who the doctor said that could impact deep stuff. Well, where did Pitts run a lot of his shit? It's deep stuff. He's not getting a lot of short stuff.
Right.
So it's like, yeah, there are better bets. And so for my bets, I wanted the elite guys I wanted a lot of were McBride and Kittle. Kittle was a lot better for price and had a more elite ceiling from touchdown volatility. I regret not having more of him. He's gotten a nut run out for like just vacated targets and whatever. But it's like, I think there were good priced elite tight ends, just like there were good priced early receivers and fake phony ones just because of the position or the peripherals. And I think just being more cognizant of what that sticker price is and looking under the hood and not just, ooh, shiny black Cadillac. It's like, well, what's under the hood? And same thing with like late tight ends. Late tight end works. If you don't take all the shitty late tight ends, and so either being diversified in the late tight ends or being mindful of how those tight ends can have a path to mattering. Good offenses, better roles than we think, or all the above plus being a little bit better than we thought. Probably shouldn't have taken as much Luke Musgrave at the expense of Tucker Kraft, even with the injury stuff, because at the end of the day, by mid to late season, who's really going to matter more? I don't know. But I was in on Kraft, and that could have he could have been out much, much longer, and Musgrave just is that role. But then I need to have much more of both of them over all the stuff. And I'm happy I had as much John. I had a shitload of Jonnu because I had math in my head and I said, what makes a tight end matter? Touchdowns. Where did touchdowns come from? Really good teams. Who's likely to have a lot of passing touchdowns? A team like Miami versus, Patriots. That got me on. And then also this guy outscored Kyle Pitts last year. What happens when he's the better yak guy? Yada, yada. That thesis hits. Awesome. Cool. Sweet. Would have loved to pair him more often with Kraft than with fucking Musgrave, or fucking. I still stand by Dawson Knox. Like,
he ran the most routes last week over Kincaid.
Curious. Elite tight end Kyle Kincaid. Oh.
Yeah, that was a rough run out. I didn't really draft a whole lot of him. I don't know. The tight end stuff. It's the spike weeks, and that's what we're in. Like, who's the guy that you need on Sunday, or if it's tonight, or if it's Saturday? That's gonna what's gonna matter in this 16 team pod that we're in. I'm very narrow right now. It's like I have Green Bay, San Fran, some Miami, a little bit of Bills. Those teams, if they don't pop, like, I'm not going to advance. But if those teams pop, then hopefully I advance one, maybe two.
I think a good lesson learned for the tight ends is play dailies. Play the daily contests and tell me how often the top 3, 4, 5 tight ends are hitting versus the randomosity of the bottom 4, 5, 6 tight ends. And what you learn very quickly is you don't want to be super overweight all of the expensive tight ends. You don't want to be underweight all of the mid to late tight ends. And at the end of the day, you just want to be humble about who the fuck catches a random touchdown or gets schemed, whatever, yada, yada.
Yeah, and the fun offenses, the Detroit offense,
Exactly. Yeah. It's like, was Laporta's price great? No. Is he one of the tight ends you'd love to have on your team because of his access to touchdowns still to this day? Yeah. So I was slightly under the field on him because of price, but it's like, It's still a top 10, top 5 offense. He's a very good tight end. Yes, is the price a little rough? Sure. Is he still a player I'd like to see on my roster if healthy all season long? Yeah. And he underperformed for a lot of the time. Sure. As injuries have piled up and as the offense has needed to kick into gear and score fucking points, he's had big fucking spike weeks again.
Yeah. So like while drafting, that's a perfect example while you're on the clock and you're like 8 picks past ADP and Laporta's there. That's the time to take him, you know?
So what about we talked about elite tight end. What about QB? Kind of with obviously I think they were going a little bit later than they had been the year before. Do you guys think they're going to get pushed back up into like that? I don't know if it'll be whatever 2-3 turn range. Allen Lamar.
Yeah, I think so. I think once the data, I look at my pod, we're all elite, all of them. I mean, there's like I think the one that I have with Chess Liam, I think I'm the only one with like further back. He has like Jaden Daniels, and I have 3. It's Love, Purdy, and no, not Goff. Baker. Those are my 3 in that, and I'm stacked to the house. I got Evans, Purdy's. Actually, my Purdy's with Kittle, and I got Ricky with him. I don't have Jennings. I wish I had Jennings.
Never know.
And then my Love is with Jacobs, Dobbs, that way. So it's like it's a nice team with like, and I got A-Chain coming back on the Niner stuff and things like that. So it's a really solid team. But for the most part, that's the only one that I have. Everything else is Josh Allen, Lamar, some Mahomes, and
any Burrow, Chase.
Yeah, a lot of Chase and Burrow. Well, I mean, I guess Burrow was not quite the elite side of things, but
No,
I think just the market missed out on the Cincinnati, you know, and that's one thing that I was pretty hot on. Was like Cincinnati's like Burrow's the dude. Like that guy Fox. So
you and Fantasy Dog Pound are big Burrow guys. I had my reservations about Cincinnati with T and Chase, but I will say for folks, one thing I did do good this year that I'm proud of is I had a lot of takes I was wrong about. I had a couple teams I said, these are my what if I'm wrong teams. And one of my what if I'm wrong teams was one of my last remaining BBMs. And I said, what if I was wrong on Jamar Chase being worth a top 3 pick? And what if I'm wrong that Rachaad White gets nuked by Bucky? I like the Bucks and I want the Bucks. Let me make sure to get some Rachaad White. Yeah. So it's Chase, Evans, Rachaad White, Baker, and other shit. And that team is one of my 2 advancing BBMs. And it's like, okay, yeah.
They're in a dome. They're in a dome Sunday night. That's a fun sweat, man. I'm with you.
We always talk about like hedging, and it's like one of the easiest ways to hedge is like draft a couple teams where what if you're wrong, and don't just make the team all wrong players, but I think have a couple teams where it's like all your players that you're fading. What if you're wrong on all of it? And then hey, and we talked about this, Bendels. We talked about this, Matt. It was like, hey, I have a stance, but let me draft like I'm wrong. And if I would have done that a little bit more often,
right.
You know, we talk about diversifying. One of the ways to diversify is like draft like you're wrong. What if you're wrong that elite tight end is where it's at? What if you're wrong that punt tight end is where it's at? What if you're wrong this offense goes off? What if you're wrong this player is awesome? Draft a couple. If you're going to do a lot of volume, at least. I think he drafted way fucking too much this summer. And it's like, but with that, I should have been comfortable saying 5 to 10% of my portfolio is my hedging. What if I'm wrong stuff? Yeah. At least then have a couple bullets where, you know, I've hedged.
I think that number is good. I would even go more than that because, like, how many times are you going to be 90% right?
Not if my wife was asking this question, never. I'm never 90%.
Football, the swings in football, or the variance in football, the injuries, like. So if anything, you should be doing that like 35% of the time.
Oh yeah, I mean, like, yeah, you look at like if you make like pick'ems and you do daily stuff, like how many of your stances are wrong? How many of them were really close to being right? I remember one of my best weeks was Winston's first week. I was like, ooh, Tillman had really good route. Winston's really aggressive. What if I build a bunch of Winston Tillman doubles with Njoku? That was great. I min cashed everything because it was really right. It wasn't the nuts. So it's like, if I drafted if I drafted every fucking week, like I'm exactly right. How can I not learn in the future that like, hey, you can be really right, you can be close to right. It doesn't make you on the right shit to win because like crazy shit happens. So yeah, you're right. Like I should going in 2 BBM teams out of 69 for the what if I'm wrong? Not enough.
Not enough.
10% of my 10% of my 950 teams, not enough. Because I mean, drafters, my best case scenario for this. Drafters full season cumulative. That is the best place to go. Every draft, what if I'm wrong? Because I just need to hit the nuts.
Yeah.
To cash one of these because it needs the nuts. Why the fuck did I draft every team so very heavy on like these pockets of players? Because even if I'm right and they just get injured, it nukes everything. I'm having my worst year on drafters because I wasn't humble enough to say every draft I just need to hit the season long nuts. Let me play the draft room like it's the season long nuts, and I'm wrong on X, Y, and Z. And then applying that to week in and week out, where like you can be really right, and then if guys just like Jalen Hurts the last 3 years has been the perfect example of that. He even those stacks have been great to good every fucking year. And 2 of the years he missed 1 to 2 weeks in the fantasy playoffs, and it fucking sunk all your shit. You were right. You weren't right for that one important week. What if you drafted more diverse of like, what if the Eagles hit, but they just have a down week when it matters, etc. You'd build your team differently. We're just really bad at saying, what if we're stupid dumbasses that are wrong?
Ego, man. You got to punch it down.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. You guys kind of sent some other like lessons learned. Do you guys have any other ones you really want to call out, or things that you think stood out in your brain when you're just thinking of like, I fucked this up this year?
I think the biggest thing, everybody's gonna take this slate like we did from BBM4 to BBM5, and they're gonna jump to some conclusions that are a little bit they're overconfident in. So I really think it's really smart for you to be just a little bit, if you're getting really comfortable and you're drafting a lot of the same type of teams, you got to know that everybody is with you doing the exact same thing. And you need to like step back and be like, I got to do something a little bit different because I can't be with the field. When you want to win these contests, you have to be different. Like you have to.
I mean, look at Liam. Liam won because he went Bills go Burr the year that the Bills go Burr.
Yeah.
And Herzig won when it was like, what if running backs? And then that season it was running backs. And this year we'll fucking see. But it's like, yeah, people say I got to zig when they're zagging. Okay, well, are you going to do that intelligently? Or are you going to do that in the dumbest fucking way possible? It's not always the opposite of what people are doing, but it's certainly not, as you said, doing exactly what everybody else is doing, or at least the bubble. Because we do talk about like half the finals is going to be the sharpest of the sharp players. So I'd like to be differentiated from the sharpest players. And this year, that was mostly fading Kyle Shitz, fading Dalton Kincaid, and fading Jalen Warren for Najee. I probably could have done a few more things to help differentiate my rosters than 3 fucking players. So
yeah. Again, it's just small little tweaks. It's not like it's not dramatic like.
Yeah, it's like, not 3 elite quarterbacks, 2 elite tight ends, 3 elite running backs, and then all my receivers. You don't have to go all the way one way or the other. Yeah.
That's it. I mean, it's next season. There's gonna be different quarterbacks, new places. OT's moving into head coaching positions, so it's gonna be news. Whoever stays up on the news and whoever can get on like. There's some good coaching in Tampa Bay going right now. See where they go. If not, they're going to be a good team to invest in next year. Finding those teams that like people aren't really drafting high. Like I think the Bucs are going to do really well this week, and I'm hopeful that I can get to week 17 riding some of those Tampa Bay Buccaneers. We'll see. That's finding those offenses that are just not like in the first 6 rounds. And being a little bit overweight, not like extremely overweight, but just a little bit overweight on those offenses the market doesn't think. Sure. They could find some fantasy value out of will help.
Tyler, any other things you want to call out?
I think at the end of the day, there's an art to getting really deep in the weeds when we're inspecting, but then, and I think one thing we talked about is like not getting caught up in the monotony of it. And I think the one way to do that is just like taking a step back. You can draft every fucking day, but then I think you get in too much of a rhythm. So it's like take time to take a step away from the drafting and evaluate, and then and then go back in and evaluate, and then come back and evaluate. It's like it's not just getting overloaded with rhythm or monotony and repetition, but I think it's also getting super deep in the weeds. And Josh Jacobs is a great example of this. Is of like, okay, I've articulated very good reasons why this may not work out. Have I taken a step back and then said, well, how likely are those things to happen versus the ways he's successful? And then properly weight that, and then come away going like, oh, at best, this is 60-40, I'm right. Am I drafting 60-40 like I'm right?
Right.
No. Should I? Yeah. And so it's like, I think the way to be humble is evaluate what it takes, evaluate the likelihood of it takes, and then take a step back to hear different arguments, different reasonings, even if it's your own or others, whatever. And then just try to weight the likelihoods of those things, and then also drizzle in the variance of chaos, and then remind yourself that when you're on the clock for those things. Because we can get so deep in the weeds that we miss the forest, and you don't want to miss the forest. And so I think it's like when you're having all these takes, going like, okay, is it attached to a good offense? Can it be a great offense? In week 17, when this is going to matter, and I'm going like I'm up against the best fucking players, etc. Like, what the simple things of like is great offense, is great coordinator, can this work, or how likely is it that this works? Like asking yourself those things, and at some point you're going to come away with a lot of your takes. You're like, I don't know, and and then draft like it, and it's or do your ranks like that, or etc. But when you're spreading things out, try to spread your things out in the simplistic way of the macro. It's like attach to great offenses, great quarterbacks, etc. Zoom out with the macro stuff, and then get back into the nitty, because I think there is value in nitty gritty for health, for usage, for coach speak, but you can also get sucked up in it, because like how much that stuff matters in July, 7 months later, might be none. They might have totally wanted to do that, and then they might have totally wanted to use Kyron, and then the fucking Corum, and then the offensive line exploded. They lost Puka Nakua for 5 fucking weeks, and they lost Cooper Kupp for 4 fucking weeks, and they decided we're locking it down. We're trusting the vet. Like, we'll never know. But like that was possible. That like when the shit was down, they're not trusting anybody except the people they don't. So, see that I would say that, but then it's like, I mean, I remember how much you loved Hollywood Brown. I remember how much you loved it. It's with the same thing. Like we could say, don't listen to. I can say that about Javonte. I hated Javonte. I wanted none of Javonte. Okay, but if I didn't listen to anybody else, I wouldn't have been on Javonte. But I probably also wouldn't have been on like Tucker Kraft, or like Chance Price and etc. So it's a fine line, right? It's just getting better at evaluating and asking why, how, and then will any of this matter 5 months from now? And if the answer is like maybe not, then it's like, okay, then is it valuable to think about and let it impact? And how much of this discourse is changing because like we've had last year all the quarterbacks went down, this year all the fucking wide receivers went down, and it didn't matter what style. So it's like I try to keep the takeaways pretty simplistic and holistic, because like you said, one plate. The takeaways are going to probably be way too minute, way too exact, and it's a favorite of the Discord. We're trying to be right instead of trying to win. And it's okay. Then if I'm trying to win, I need to play like I'm going to win instead of playing like I'm right.
I think one little key also is just look at the O lines. If you look at it, the best O lines in football, they're correlated for scoring kind of the most fantasy points.
Yeah.
So if you can kind of, and the surprise teams kind of come from those good O lines. So if you can kind of pay attention to who's healthy going in and who has the week by week, season by season continuity in the O lines, like that's gonna harness some good fantasy goodness. So I really think like going into that kind of detail, into the weeds of O line play, I think will help you for years to come in playing fantasy sports.
Yeah. No, yeah, I think, I mean, this kind of goes into all we've been talking about. But I think I say that as the best ball cabal and kind of people that are doing content and stuff like that. Like, we're very good at getting so nitty gritty, and it's like, it's not to say that that's bad, but it's like, I think we lose, like you said, like Tyler, like losing the forest or the trees for the,
well, it's to win arguments. A lot of it is
zoomed in,
is to win an argument. They put all the stats behind to win the argument, to be right on Twitter.
Yeah, and it's
to have that ego take because they want to be fucking right. Like, we all want to be right. But
me.
But yeah, it's like, I think we just add, like, because we're drawn to this game and because this is like something we really enjoy, we can really zoom in, but then it's like, and we can zoom out as well, but it's finding that balance, and not just, especially when you're arguing with someone or you're trying to prove a point, like you're saying, like, then we just don't, we can't take the ego out of it and zoom out. So, but yeah, thanks so much for hopping on, guys. Before we head off, why don't you guys just kind of talk about your dog bowl experience and just whatever, how great of a time it was.
How was my dog bowl experience? Do you see that pool floaty that we took from the Dallas porn mansion that they rented out? It was a great time. You kidding me? We drank all their beers in their fridges. We partied. We shut it down. We partied to shut the mansions down back-to-back nights and then back-to-back after parties.
Yeah.
Matt,
it was a blast. Tyler, you're the best, man. I had so much fun with you. Thank you for everything that you did, man. I would just say, like, ex-player, and he would just give me the goods of, like, the coach speak and potential injury, and I'd be like, all right, before I go to, like, draft my team, any news? Nope, you got it all. Like, it was great. I had such a good time.
And then that's what you brought me there for. You brought me for good vibes and good info, and I brought both. And honestly, it was
good hair.
I hid it under a hat most of the fucking weekend because it was fucking raining the whole goddamn time. But still sexy, and it was kind of freeing to just go, here's information, and not have to do any takes about it, and have some takes in my head. And then come Sunday, I was just like, oh, I was wrong on a lot of this. And it's just like, this is good. I needed to, like, I need more and more reminders that, like, I could be dead fucking wrong. And it's like, that's going to make my drafts better, because it's like, okay, let's zoom out then. Let's look at what matters and draft what we know matters, and then go to, like, still the ball will fucking roll the wrong way. Shit'll happen, whatever. And keep it simple and draft with pure hearts and big peens. And
game environments is critical in this game, man.
It's incredibly incredible. Yeah,
you gotta get on the right games, and there's 2 or 3, but for the most part, in a 10-game slate, like the dog bowl is a prime example. It's a 10-game slate, and I was like, Tyler, there's gonna be 3 games. You got to be on those 3 games. Got to find those 3 games. Got to get those 3 games, and that was like the only reasons why I got 6th place, was because I was only really invested in really. The one that came in 6th was just was all stacked up in 2 game environments.
Yep, and you were pretty much right. Yeah, you were pretty much right. Like that week, it was Rams Bills, it was Falcons Vikings, and it was, at the end of the day, like Miami. Yes, brother. Yeah. The OnlyFans is alive and well. At emo, what is it? Reverse EmoCowboy. At reverse EmoCowboy. I will eventually figure out what the fuck to do with that, besides posting my Mexico Speedo selfies. But if you want to see me in a Speedo much too small for my balls that says juicy on the cock, go check out at Emo Reverse Cowboy. I get no money from doing this, but it is fun, and it makes my wife upset. So that's why we do it. Love of the game, baby.
That's why we do it. All right, guys. Well, go over to the Fantasy Sanctuary, where you can go check out Tyler. And they're doing other great content all the time over there. Go follow Mathology on Twitter, and we will definitely be on here again talking ball throughout the off season. I'm trying to work out on the details on the off season plans for myself. I'm going to try to do one day a week, keep it tight, keep it concise, and have some good guests on. And yeah, good luck to everyone in week 16 and in the finals. Hopefully we can get someone from the community banking it, and
To the guy you need. To the guy.
Yeah, you mean.
All right, everyone, make sure to like, subscribe, and keep being sexy.